Evelyn, where are you? Why is our house just gone? Ethan's voice, laced with panic, was music to my ears. I savored the moment, the sweet retribution for his betrayal. Yes, Ethan, I had it demolished. Everything you left behind is gone. But why? His disbelief was palpable. Because, Ethan, some things are too broken to be fixed, I replied, a cold calmness in my voice. I am Evelyn, a 45-year-old caregiver, married to Ethan, a 46-year-old marketing executive. Our son, Lucas, had just moved out after college, leaving an echo in our home and apparently in Ethan's sense of responsibility. The day Lucas left, Ethan chuckled, Evelyn, he's not a kid anymore. Let him make his own mistakes. I remember feeling a twinge of annoyance, masked by the relief of seeing them both smile. But that annoyance, that small crack, was about to widen into a chasm. Just as I thought we'd rediscover each other, life took a sharp turn. Dad fell in the yard. Broken bone, maybe. I'm heading to the hospital, Ethan informed me one evening, his voice oddly detached. Should I come with you? No, I got this. Don't worry. But worry I did. At work, I was distracted, feeling an impending sense of doom. Returning home, I found Ethan lounging on the couch, as if his father's fracture was just another minor inconvenience. He'll need a cane, Ethan said casually, as if discussing the weather. This wasn't just about a cane. This was about Henry, Ethan's father, who had been living alone since his wife passed away 3 years ago. Despite our offers, he had refused to move in with us, valuing his independence. Now the decision was made for him. We should live with your dad, right? I asked Ethan, already knowing his answer. Sure, why not? He's family. The family home, where Ethan grew up, was more suitable for Henry in his condition. It was settled. We would move in with Henry. Little did I know, this decision was the first step towards an irreversible change, a change that would shatter the very foundations of our life together. That evening, as I looked around our soon-to-be-left condo, memories of Lucas's childhood flooded my mind. There was a bittersweet tang in the air, a mix of nostalgia and foreboding. Ethan's indifference was like a growing shadow in our home, but I was too preoccupied with the logistics of the move to confront it. In my heart, I hoped this move would bring us closer, not just to Henry, but to each other. How wrong I was. The move happened faster than expected. Henry, frail but smiling, welcomed us. Sorry to be a burden, he said, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of memories held within the walls of his home. You're not a burden, Dad. You're family. I assured him, while Ethan just nodded, his mind seemingly elsewhere. That night, as I lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the old house, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed more distant than ever, lost in thoughts I could not reach. It was the beginning of the end, the start of a journey that would lead me to the ultimate act of defiance. Little did Ethan know, his world, our world, was about to come crashing down. The walls of Henry's house, steeped in history, were now silent witnesses to a growing rift. As days turned to weeks, Ethan's late returns from work became the norm. His once warm smiles were replaced by a cold, distant demeanor. Evelyn, he's my father. I know how to handle him, Ethan snapped one evening when I expressed my concern about his lack of involvement with Henry. I bit my tongue, the bitterness of his words stinging me. It wasn't just about Henry, it was about us, about what we were becoming, or rather what we were losing. Julia, Ethan's sister, visited one weekend. Her concern was palpable as she watched us moving around each other like distant planets in a decaying orbit. Are you sure about this, Evelyn? Living with Dad, I mean. I can take him if it's too much, Julia offered, her eyes searching mine for a hint of reluctance. I forced a smile. No, Julia, it's fine. We're fine. But we weren't. Ethan's aloofness was growing into a chasm that I could no longer bridge. His excuses for staying out late became more frequent, his explanations more flimsy. Evelyn, I'm just grabbing a drink with colleagues. Networking, you know, he would say, his words lacking the conviction they once held. Networking or escaping? I found solace in Henry's company. Our conversations, filled with stories of the past, were a balm to my growing loneliness. In those moments, I felt a connection, a belonging that had started to fade with Ethan. One evening, as I helped Henry with his exercises, his voice trembled. Evelyn, you've been like a daughter to me. I hate to be the cause of any trouble between you and Ethan. I held his hand, assuring him, Henry, you are not the problem. Please don't think that. But deep down, I knew the problem wasn't Henry. It wasn't even Ethan's late nights. The problem was something far more sinister, a rot that had set in the core of our marriage. Ethan's indifference was now a gaping hole, swallowing any remnants of the love we once shared. His absence, both physical and emotional, left me grappling with a myriad of unanswered questions. Was this our new normal? A life of silent meals, unshared beds, and unspoken words? I lay awake that night, listening to the creaks of the old house, each groan echoing the turmoil in my heart. I missed Ethan, or rather, the Ethan I thought I knew. The man who now lay beside me, lost in his own world, was a stranger. As the days blurred into each other, Ethan's neglect of both Henry and me became more pronounced. His once excited talks about his day at work dwindled to monosyllables. His late-night returns were now expected, and his excuses a mere formality. The gap between us widened, filled with unspoken accusations and stifled emotions. I was living with a ghost, a shadow of the man I married. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I stumbled upon the first thread of the web of deceit Ethan had been weaving. A thread that would unravel everything we had built together. As I lay there, staring into the darkness, I made a decision. I would no longer be a spectator in this crumbling facade of a marriage. I was going to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And if my suspicions were correct, Ethan would soon learn that some actions have irreversible consequences. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The drama of our lives was about to reach its crescendo. The days turned into a monotonous cycle, with Ethan's apathy casting a shadow over the household. His late returns became so routine that I stopped asking where he had been. The silence between us grew louder, filled with unasked questions and unvoiced suspicions. One Saturday, I decided to confront him. "Ethan, your father feels neglected." "You're hardly here," I said, my voice a mix of frustration and desperation. Ethan scoffed. "He's fine, Evelyn. Stop being so dramatic. I have my life too, you know." His words stung, and I recoiled at his dismissiveness. Was this really the man I had loved for all these years? As I tended to Henry, his gratitude only deepened my resentment towards Ethan. "You're too good to us, Evelyn. I'm sorry for my son's behavior," Henry whispered during one of our walks. "It's not your fault, Henry. I just wish Ethan could see what he's missing," I replied, my heart heavy with unshed tears. Julia's visits became my solace, her presence a stark contrast to Ethan's indifference. "Evelyn, if you ever need to talk, I'm here," she offered one afternoon as we sipped tea in the garden. I nodded, grateful for her support, but too proud to admit how much Ethan's neglect was affecting me. The final straw came on a rainy Thursday evening. Ethan had not returned home and his phone went straight to voicemail. Worried, I waited up, the clock ticking away my patience. He stumbled in past midnight, reeking of alcohol. "Where were you?" I demanded, my worry turning into anger. "Just out, Evelyn." "Stop being such a nag," he slurred, brushing past me. That word, nag, echoed in my mind, igniting a fire within me. I was not a nag. I was a wife concerned about her crumbling marriage. The following week, my suspicions turned into reality. While cleaning, I found a receipt in Ethan's jacket, a hotel receipt dated for a night he had claimed to be working late. My hands trembled as I read the details. Room service, a bottle of champagne, and a single room for two. The betrayal sliced through me, each word on the receipt a confirmation of Ethan's infidelity. My heart raced, a mixture of anger, pain, and disbelief coursing through me. I confronted him that evening, the receipt clenched in my fist. "What is this, Ethan? Explain this to me," I yelled, my composure shattered. Ethan's eyes widened, then narrowed. "It's not what you think, Evelyn. It was just a business meeting that went late." "A business meeting? With champagne in a hotel room?" I spat, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Ethan's silence was the only answer I needed. The truth hung in the air, a tangible presence that neither of us could deny. That night I lay awake, the weight of Ethan's betrayal crushing me. I had been a faithful wife, a caring stepdaughter, and yet this was the payment for my loyalty. As dawn broke, a cold resolve settled over me. Ethan had made his choice, and now I would make mine. It was time for Ethan to learn that every action has consequences. I would no longer be the silent victim of his deceit. The plan started to form in my mind, a plan that would shake the very foundation of Ethan's world. He had underestimated me for the last time. Evelyn, the doting wife and caregiver, was about to show Ethan a side of her he had never seen, a side that even I hadn't known existed. The stage was set for my revenge, and I was ready to play my part to perfection. Ethan's days of betrayal were numbered, and he wouldn't even see it coming. Armed with the bitter truth, I was a storm brewing on the horizon. Ethan's betrayal had lit a fire within me, and I was determined to make him pay. My plan for revenge began to take shape, fueled by each lie he had told, each night he had left me alone. Julia visited again, and this time I didn't hold back. "Ethan's having an affair," I confessed, the words tasting like poison on my lips. Julia's shock quickly turned to anger. "That bastard! How could he do this to you, to Dad?" "We need to do something, Julia. I won't let him get away with this," I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. "We'll figure this out, Evelyn. I'm with you," Julia assured, her hand gripping mine. The opportunity presented itself when Ethan casually mentioned an upcoming business trip. "A week in New York. Big project," he said, avoiding my gaze. "A week, huh?" I mused, a plan forming in my mind. "Have a good trip." But it wouldn't be the business trip Ethan was expecting. No, this would be the week when his world would come crashing down. I started my preparations the moment he left. With Julia's help, I gathered evidence of his affair, hotel receipts, phone records, late-night messages. Each piece was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Next, I contacted a lawyer to discuss divorce and property rights. I would not only leave Ethan, but I would also strip him of everything he held dear. His betrayal had cost him more than just our marriage. It would cost him his home, his comfort, his security. "Evelyn, are you sure about this?" Julia asked, concern etched on her face. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, a cold determination in my voice. While Ethan was living it up in New York, oblivious to the storm brewing back home, I was executing my plan with precision. The house, Ethan's childhood home, was the first to go. I hired a demolition crew, explaining that the house was old and needed to be torn down for safety reasons. As the bulldozers tore through the walls, I watched with a sense of grim satisfaction. This was more than just a physical demolition. It was symbolic of the destruction of our marriage. Next, I arranged for the sale of the land. The property was in my name, thanks to Ethan's careless handling of the paperwork. The land would fetch a good price, and the money would be mine alone. As the days passed, my plan unfolded flawlessly. I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was the architect of Ethan's downfall. Finally, the day of Ethan's return arrived. I waited for his call, the anticipation a sweet torture. "Evelyn, where are you? What happened to the house?" Ethan's voice was laced with confusion and panic. "I had it demolished, Ethan. And the land, it's been sold," I replied, each word a dagger to his heart. "What? Why? Evelyn, that was our home," he stammered, his voice a mix of disbelief and despair. "It was a house, Ethan, not a home. And now it's gone, just like our marriage," I said, my voice calm and steady. "But why? How could you do this?" Ethan's plea was pathetic, a far cry from the confident man he once was. "You made your choice, Ethan. Now I've made mine. Goodbye." With that, I hung up, cutting off any further pleas or excuses. As I sat in the silent room, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had done it. I had taken back control of my life. Ethan's betrayal had shattered our marriage, but it had also awakened a strength in me that I never knew I had. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And as I looked ahead to my new life, free from lies and deceit, I knew one thing for sure. Ethan would never forget the name Evelyn. Ethan's world had crumbled, and I was the architect of its downfall. The day he returned, I waited, knowing he would confront me. As expected, his car screeched to a halt where our home once stood, now just an empty lot. "What have you done, Evelyn?" Ethan bellowed as he approached, his face a mask of shock and anger. "I've freed myself from a life of lies and deceit," I replied calmly, my resolve unshaken. "This was my childhood home. How could you?" His voice cracked under the weight of his loss. "Your childhood home? You mean the house where you neglected your father and betrayed your wife?" My words were sharp, cutting through the air between us. Ethan staggered as if my words were physical blows. "Evelyn, please, let's talk about this." "Talk? Like you talked to your mistress?" I countered, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "You don't understand. It was a mistake," Ethan pleaded, his eyes searching for any sign of the love that once bound us. "A mistake repeated is a choice, Ethan, and you chose her over us. Over everything we built together, I said, the finality in my voice echoing in the empty space. Ethan looked around, desperation taking hold. But where will I go? What about my things? Your things are in storage. As for where you'll go, that's no longer my concern, I stated, devoid of any sympathy. I never thought you could be this cruel. Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Cruel? No, Ethan, I'm not cruel. I'm just no longer your fool, I replied, turning away from the ruins of our past. Ethan's voice faded as I walked away, leaving him amidst the debris of his choices. I had exacted my revenge, not out of cruelty, but out of respect for myself. As I drove away, the weight of the past years seemed to lift off my shoulders. I was no longer bound by Ethan's betrayal or the confines of a loveless marriage. In destroying our physical home, I had built myself a new one, a sanctuary of self-respect and dignity. Ethan had taken so much from me, but he couldn't take away my strength or my ability to start anew. I had closed the chapter on Ethan and our life together. Now it was time to write a new story, one where I was the protagonist, not a victim of someone else's script. Ethan's downfall was the price he paid for his betrayal. As for me, I had gained something far more valuable, my freedom and a chance to rediscover who I was before I lost myself in our marriage. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was a road I looked forward to traveling. Ethan was a part of my past, a chapter closed and left behind. The future was mine to shape, and I embraced it with open arms and a heart free of the chains of betrayal. The aftermath of the house's demolition left Ethan in a state of shock and desperation. A few days later he called, his voice laced with a mix of anger and disbelief. Evelyn, we need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th, please. I agreed, curious to see how he would try to spin this tale. At the cafe, Ethan sat hunched over, a shadow of his former self. Evelyn, why are you doing this? You've destroyed everything, he blurted out as I sat down. Destroyed everything. Ethan, you did that when you chose to have an affair, I replied, my tone even but firm. That was a mistake. But this, what you're doing, it's unforgivable. His voice cracked, his facade of control crumbling. A mistake? No, Ethan. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill, not cheating on your wife. I countered sharply. You can't just take everything from me. The house? The money? What about me? Ethan's plea was pathetic, tinged with selfishness. What about you? What about me, Ethan? Or did you forget that there were two people in this marriage? I challenged. Ethan's face contorted with frustration. You're being unreasonable. You're ruining my life over a fling. A fling? Is that what you call breaking our vows, our trust? My voice rose, attracting glances from nearby tables. Evelyn, please, we can fix this. I'll end it with her. We can go to counseling, Ethan offered, desperation seeping into his voice. Fix this? There's nothing left to fix, Ethan. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it, I said, my decision clear and unwavering. I'll lose my job, my reputation. You don't understand the consequences, he pleaded. The consequences? You should have thought of that before. Anish, as for your job and reputation, those were never my concern, I replied, my tone icy. Ethan slumped, defeated. So, what now? A divorce? Yes, a divorce. And since you're so concerned about consequences, I've recorded this conversation. Admitting to your affair will make the proceedings much smoother, I revealed, watching as the color drained from his face. You recorded me? Ethan gasped, his eyes wide with shock. Yes. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions, Ethan. You've lost more than just a house. You've lost a wife who loved you, a family that respected you, and a life that you took for granted, I stated, standing up to leave. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Ethan's voice, calling out to me, was just a distant echo. I had closed that chapter of my life, and there was no turning back. The price of betrayal was high, and Ethan was paying it in full. I had not just sought revenge, I had sought justice for myself. The future was uncertain, but it was a future where I was no longer shackled by Ethan's deceit. I was free, and that freedom was the sweetest victory of all. The dust had settled, and Ethan's world was irrevocably altered. The divorce proceedings were swift, fueled by the incontrovertible evidence of his affair. He tried to argue, to fight, but the truth left him with no ground to stand on. As I sat across from him in the lawyer's office for the final signing, he was a mere shell of the man I once knew. Evelyn, please, can't we rethink this? Ethan's voice was a desperate whisper. There's nothing left to rethink, Ethan. You made your choices and now I've made mine, I replied, my voice steady and resolute. With each signature, I felt a chapter of my life closing, a chapter filled with pain, betrayal, and ultimately liberation. When it was over, Ethan tried to speak, but I cut him off. There's nothing more to say, Ethan. Goodbye. Leaving the office, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer Ethan's wife. I was Evelyn, free and unbound. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's life continued to unravel. His job was lost, a casualty of the scandal. His reputation, once impeccable, was now tarnished by the truth of his indiscretions. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was living in a small apartment, a stark contrast to the life of comfort he once knew. His mistress had left him, unwilling to deal with the fallout of their affair. Ethan was alone, a consequence of his own making. As for me, I started anew. The money from the sale of the land allowed me financial freedom, and I found peace in my independence. I reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies I had long forgotten, and found joy in the small things. Julia and I remained close, our bond strengthened by the trials we faced together. "You're stronger than you ever realized, Evelyn," she said to me one evening over dinner. "I guess I am," I replied, a smile playing on my lips. My new life was simpler but richer in ways that money couldn't buy. I had respect, dignity, and a sense of self that no one could take from me. Ethan tried to reach out a few times, but I never responded. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no intention of revisiting it. I often thought about the house, the symbol of our broken marriage. In its destruction, I had found my strength. It was a drastic step, but it was necessary for me to break free. Now, looking ahead, I saw a path filled with possibilities. A path where I was the author of my own story, no longer a character in someone else's drama. The road to recovery was not easy, but it was mine to travel. I had survived the storm, and in its wake, I found a peace I never knew existed. Ethan's betrayal had shattered me, but in those broken pieces, I found myself, and that was the greatest victory of all.